Do you worry as a professor that what you say is going to have blowback with your students and or faculty?
I mean, it's not fun to be called Professor Genocide online.
If Mexico had elected a jihadist cartel to run their country and then they incurred into Texas and on a per capita basis killed 35,000 people, or the population of the University of Texas, and on the way back took the freshman class at SMU hostage and hid them under tunnels, what would we do?
The question for me that helps me find moral clarity is, what happens if Hamas had control? My gay brothers and sisters get thrown off roofs? What happens to the women in our society? I get shot in the head. War is terrible. We can argue about whether the response has been overdone. At some point, an occupying force has an obligation to ensure there's humanitarian aid. But you go into a superior military infrastructure and you create that kind of butchery, you are going to pay a severe price.
Hi, I'm Shane Smith, and this week on Shane Smith Has Questions, we're actually in New York, so we won't be filming here. We'll be filming in a studio there with Scott Galloway, and we're going to be talking about all things international because it's UN General Assembly Week. Here it is, Scott Galloway, New York City, Bango. We ready?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
We got speed.
We are speeding.
Oh, my Lord. I'm so in love with you, purge the soul. Scott Galloway. The man, the machine, the legend.
Yeah, go on.
BA in economics from UCLA, just down the street from where I live. Lovely campus. MBA in marketing. UC Berkeley, Haas School of Business. Professor of marketing.
That's right.
At NYU Stern School of Business. Teaching brand strategy, digital marketing. Named one of the world's top 50 business school professors.
Yeah, I think it was 49th.
There you go. Serial entrepreneur and founder of 9 companies, including L2, Red Envelope, Profit. You got a lot of them. You're a serial entrepreneur, we call that.
Yeah, so yeah.
New York Times bestselling author. The 4, The Algebra of Happiness, Post-Corona, The Algebra of Wealth. You love algebra. And you have a new one called Notes on Being a Man, which I want to get into.
Thanks, man.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. We did a show with you on Vice.
My first TV show.
First off, our rant. Every time you open your phone or your computer, your brain is walking onto a battleground for the scarcest resource of the 21st century, specifically your attention.
And then you went on, same name, same concept, killed it, and now it's a huge, successful newsletter that goes to 500,000 people and makes you tons of money.
The newsletter was before.
Oh, before. It was before.
Yeah, and the newsletter does not make a lot of money, but it's sort of my...
Calling card.
Well, it's my passion project. Every Thursday night I write about whatever's on my mind, whether it's what it's like to raise boys or, the economics of late night television. So it's just, do you write, Shane?
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing I do. I'm super into fitness, and my mental fitness is trying to write.
Yeah. You look good.
Oh, thanks.
And
man.
your mental, you know who you remind me of, which is going to be a weird one?
Okay.
Tony Blair.
Really?
And Jimmy Carter. You want to know why?
I love both those men.
Well, Tony Blair, I'm a student of politics. I love politics. And I remember, I don't know if you ever see, Question Period. You know what that is?
Yeah.
And so, some British lord, and, this type of representation is tantamount to no representation. And he would leap up, and 46% of blah, 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 and it was like, sap, sap, and he had every stat and everything. And Jimmy Carter, too, would be like, well... In China, in 1946, the grain production was only 27 tons. And you'd be like, well, the f*** do you remember all this stuff? And you can just recite facts and figures. And as I get older, I used to have a phenomenal memory, if I do say so myself. And now I'm like, the thing with the guy and, whatever.
Yeah.
And but you're like Tony Blair. You're on it. You're snappy. You're good.
Thanks, man.
Enough of the f***ing kudos. We're going to get into some stuff. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of happening.
Yeah.
I'm here because of UNGA, UNGA, the General Assembly, which is happening.
Thank you very much for being here, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, and world leaders.
We could just start there because it's happening. Conspiracy theory.
Say more.
Did you hear about the escalator broke down, the teleprompter, that everything broke that Trump tried to use? And they're saying it's a conspiracy.
I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
I interviewed Lavrov a few times, and he's here, and we're waiting to see what he says, but He's the Russian foreign minister, has been since perestroika, since Gorbachev.
Yeah, he's a talented diplomat. Whatever you think of his politics, he's a talented diplomat.
We've noticed in the last year a very disturbing rise in Cold War rhetoric. We have Russia on one side, America on the other.
Well, I think it started much earlier. After the Cold War, there was a unique chance to go the way which was different. But after the Soviet Union ceased to exist, the Western countries opted for NATO to be the center where they concentrated all their efforts.
He's like, I studied at a school of, this will date me, Soviet studies.
Nice.
So I got in, it was a very hard school to get into. I got into it. And I think I was in second year, a year and a half in, and the Soviet Union ceased to exist.
Yeah.
So I moved to Eastern Europe, but loved that era. He and when I met him, he's still that guy. He's like a zero-sum game political strategist. He's just a cut of the old cloth.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's here. Trump has gone from being pro-Russia, Ukraine's going to have to cede territory, to now saying Russia's a paper tiger and Ukraine shouldn't cede any territory.
Yeah.
Thoughts? What's happening in the Ukraine?
Well, typically when like my mother was a 4-year-old Jew sleeping in the tube in London during the Blitz.
Four?
Yeah, she was 4
okay.
in 1939.
Yeah, all right.
And had we not recognized that a murderous autocrat invading Europe was important, that it was important that we push back on it and that it required and was worth sacrificing, brawn, brains, and blood, I wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think that I would have hoped that America would provide that same sort of leadership and foresight when Europe again is invaded by a murderous autocrat. And I would argue that, so I believe Biden was doing the right thing. I think, unfortunately, Trump, depending upon the day, I find his foreign policy sclerotic. I could not identify a philosophy around his foreign policy. He calls it America first. I don't know what to expect from him from one day to the next. Anything where he is being supportive of Ukraine, I think is a good thing. I personally think that the right strategy would be not these sweeping statements, but for him to be meeting with the Joint Chiefs, Macron, NATO, and figuring out a way to take, the important number is 17%, and that is Ukrainian army has been able to damage 17% of the refining infrastructure of Russia. To me, if that number goes to 19, then to 21, then to 25, with an economy whose 50% of their GDP is based on fossil fuels, Putin comes to the table to negotiate some sort of settlement. So I think the best way to end a war is to win it. I think it's disappointing that, the core competence of the Russians right now is a willingness to kill their own people. Mm-hmm. Europe is being invaded, and the Spanish or the Germans or the British are nowhere near contemplating putting a single boot on the ground. And we have been very remiss and prude to even offer weapons that they can use for offensive measures. So I'm really happy with the president's policy today. We'll see where it goes. But when you have attack drones coming into Estonia and Poland, which have triggered Article 4 and could trigger Article 5, and we seem to be ignoring it because we're focused on all this bullshit around whatever it is, the latest thing. I think what's happening in Ukraine is probably more important than almost anything in the news right now, and we don't seem to be that interested. So I'm hopeful that we remain steadfast in our support of Ukraine, and I hope we increase it.
Yeah, I think our position seems to be a bit schizophrenic, going back to our friend Lavrov.
Yeah.
They've said this for the past 15 years. If you come and put in weapons on our border or try to have NATO come in, we're going to attack. And so he's like, yeah, we've been saying that since the beginning. How do you see it ending up, A? And B, you mentioned Article 5 NATO, meaning if you attack one of us, you attack all of us.
All of us, yeah.
And so is there a trigger there? I say this because it's interesting. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people think, okay, that's World War III. Because, by the way, that's where it happened the last time,
right.
Poland and the region. And, and if you attack NATO, then all of NATO has to get involved, et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting. The other place where they say World War III will, the sort of touchstone or the lightning that will hit is bombing Iran. And for the longest time, if you bomb Iran, if Israel bombs them, then it's over.
Yeah.
That's World War III. Israel not only bombed them, we bombed them, and nothing happened. So That's a lot of stuff, but what do you see happening in the Ukraine and on a much larger thing, NATO or what do you think the fallout from Iran bombing?
That's a lot.
A lot of stuff.
I'll give you a viewpoint. I'll quote another great British leader, Margaret Thatcher, when she was describing what I think the head of Germany in World War I, they had said to him, "Do you want war?" And he said, "No, I don't want war. I want victory at an acceptable cost." Mm-hmm. I think our job with our great allies in Europe, and which is arguably the greatest alliance in history in terms of keeping peace and prosperity for the last 8 years, our job is to make the cost of victory for Putin an unacceptable cost. Mm-hmm. That comes down to money, it comes down to weapons, and it comes down, quite frankly, to a willingness to acknowledge in the past that when you appease these people, when you throw the alligator your finger, he comes back for the arm. Mm-hmm. And the notion somehow that we forced this war, I just don't think it's realistic to think that NATO has any desire to invade Russia.
Yeah, for sure, no.
And part of the agreement around a sovereign, free, democratic Ukraine was that they would denuclearize. Mm-hmm. So if you want to talk about broken promises, they gave up their nukes in exchange for security guarantees from Russia. So I don't buy the notion that somehow Russia was forced into this war. I think it's a function of their demographics, a function of them wanting to fulfill the vision of Putin where he sees this old vision of a sphere of influence of Russia. And the reality is the economy has not performed there. Things have changed. But the notion somehow that they're under imminent threat from the West, I don't think that adds up. I think this is a moment where Europe needs to step up. I think they are, largely because they think they have a crazy rich uncle who's gone really fucking crazy and they can no longer depend upon the military umbrella of the U.S. I think that's a victory for Trump. He said, look, we're sick of protecting you, right? You guys got to step up and pay. Europe is stepping up. Poland's going from 2% to 5% of GDP, and Poland is an economic miracle right now. If you go from 2 to 3% across Europe, that's an incremental $200 billion. But look, I don't think appeasement works. Mm-hmm. I think we've got to be willing to take bigger risks here. I think the bigger risk is creating an incentive structure where a guy thinks he can fly attack drones into the EU. I think you take the fight overseas. Mm-hmm. And I think our greatest moment that defined a post-world order, which has been created greater prosperity, lowered infant mortality, created more alliances, is the alliance between Europe and the U.S. around World War II. World War II was won with American brawn, British brains, and Russian blood. It's a shame that the Russians are no longer allies. I went to World Cup there. I hung out in St. Petersburg, and I can remember thinking, it's just so strange that we hate each other. Mm-hmm. Just it doesn't make any sense, right? But my view is I really hope and I think I'd like to see a president who is more resolved in creating alliances that more formidably, in a cohesive, cogent manner, make sure that Putin understands victory cannot happen here at an acceptable cost.
Football season is upon us, and this season we've teamed up with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we have special offers for our listeners every single week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE, that's Shaney, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Just make sure you use bonus code Shane when you sign up. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code Shane and get up to $1,500 first bet offer today. To go back to why are we enemies, I mean, what's interesting when I brought up Iran, which we didn't get to, but I'm going to, culturally, Iran and Russia are interesting because when you go to Iran, Tehran is kind of a cosmopolitan city, and everybody knows or has relatives in London or in L.A., and they all have satellite TV and et cetera, et cetera. And they say, look, just don't do anything. But we're going to get rid of these guys. Like, we're going to get rid of the Ayatollahs. We're going to, which they don't.
It's the 37th anniversary of the revolution. They're trotting out new missile systems. There's drone systems over there. There's a lot of America being burned in effigy. And we're here to see how it's going here in Tehran.
And then in Russia, sanctions, continual sanctions, having the ruble. Look, people there just want to make money. Like, you've never met a more, which I want to get to as well, being addicted to making money. You've never met a more mercenary population. Mm-hmm. And that mercenary population, for decades, just subverts itself to not being able to make real money.
Make money, yeah.
So I find it culturally weird that the Iranians just sort of suck it up, and the Russians just sort of suck it up and say, well, it's just gonna be shitty. We're gonna let the Revolutionary Guards be the mafia and take, even though we're educated and we're smart, and we're gonna let the mafia run.
Yeah, so I went to UCLA, and some of my best friends were Iranian. I remember thinking, the Iranians I knew, were more American than the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
A love of education, a love of commerce, Latin for money.
Mm-hmm.
Like the folks that came over here during the revolution struck me as just, I've always thought that if the Iranian culture is largely indicative of the Iranians that are here now,
Mm-hmm.
that we should just be great allies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have a quarrel with the Iranian people. I think we have a quarrel with the Islamic Republic. And I do think they have 30%
It's
support.
the same as Russia.
Yeah, but I think the Russian people, there's more support of Putin than the Iranian people are supportive of the Islamic Republic.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an autocracy that blinds women when they make protests around what they can wear or not. Anesthetizes them and then takes an eye out.
Mm-hmm.
This is a depraved, theocratic regime that deserves to fall. I would like to think, the Russian public, my sense is that Putin is actually quite popular.
Mm-hmm.
How they can sacrifice 1 million of their young men to injury and death and him still be popular, I don't want to pretend I even understand
And their
that.
economy. You've never met people that love money more, and they're just like, it's just gonna suck.
I think the two are different. I would like, going back to Middle East policy, I think Israel, and I've been very outspoken on this, is doing a lot of the dirty work that America should have done. They've taken out more terrorists in 6 weeks that were on our 20 most wanted than we did in the last 20 years. They have cut off the hands of Iran's proxies.
Hezbollah, Hamas,
Houthis, Hamas, and they have done it with just such incredible strategy. The attack on Hezbollah with the pagers is arguably the most precise, successful attack on terrorism in history.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's remarkable. So I think they're a fantastic ally. I think they've done a lot of the dirty work for us that they don't get credit for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a huge fan of what Israel has done in the region. There's another longer conversation around whether the response has gone too far in Gaza. I think that's a worthwhile conversation, and I understand I have more empathy for the other side. But they are over there getting done with incredible bravery, competence, and strategy, the likes of which we couldn't seem to accomplish or we didn't have the balls to do. So I think the IDF right now is doing more for American interests in the Middle East, despite the protests you're going to see on my campus and elsewhere, than we were able to accomplish in the last 20 years in the Middle East. So I'm a huge fan of what Israel has done. I'm hopeful about Iran, that if the Islamic Republic falls, that we should be great allies with Iran. I don't know about you, I do have a lot of Iranian friends, and they go home and I think, they just seem more American than Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we share their culture. Russians, I can't even begin to understand. I don't get how such an incredible culture that's built so much, a love of science, an appreciation of education, an appreciation for money. I don't even pretend to understand how we ended up being the enemy here. I don't get it. I don't understand the nuance there.
So to go back to World War III, the bombing of Iran by Israel was supposed to start that.
In the past 24 hours, we've taken out top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility.
And I think one of the answers to my questions, which is why isn't it World War III, is because we've neutered, or they've neutered, we haven't neutered, they've neutered the traditional Hezbollah would bomb Israel, or Hamas would attack, or the Houthis would do whatever. And because of their successful, did you ever hear about the book Rise and Kill First? Have you ever heard about that? It's a great book, and it's about the Israelis knew that they couldn't win, a war against all of their neighbors, basically. So they came up with a strategy to continually assassinate high-level people in Arab militaries, and to keep them always on their back foot, which they did in Iran incredibly successfully. They'd have remote control Gatling guns and killing people. I think Soleimani was killed that way, and you're sitting there going they've neutered the threat that would come after them, which was Hamas. You look at what was happening was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the GCC were going to recognize Israel and the Abraham Accords, and everyone was getting along. And then Hamas comes out, and by the way, which is sad for many reasons, but it shows that terrorism works because it puts everything back 10, 15 years.
Well, when France, Britain, South Africa, and the UN are talking about endorsing a two-state solution, what you're saying is that terrorism pays off.
Exactly.
There's a lot here. First off, we have a long history of fucking up the Middle East. The geopolitical Hard Rock Hall of Fame first ballot mistake was by a very good man who I think otherwise was a decent president, and that is W. Him going in to Iraq, all it did was neuter the counterbalance and created Iran and the Islamic regime as a superpower there. That just couldn't have been more stupid.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends are Jews. I'm Jewish. And they love Trump because he is so resolute about Israel. And what I think they mistake is that I think Biden doesn't get the credit he deserves, and that is Hamas was hoping to inspire a five-front war against Israel. Rise up, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran. This is it. This was a siren go.
Syria
right?
at the time.
Syria. And what did Biden do? Within 24 hours, he deployed 2 carrier strike forces to sit off the coast of the Mediterranean that literally have the firepower of a Spain.
The Pentagon has deployed the 5-ship USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Strike Group to the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It joins the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, which arrived in the region early last week.
And he basically said to those other entities, sit the down. And I think it was Biden's resolution in deploying those aircraft carrier forces that cauterized what might have been a huge regional war. And real leadership is about the shit that doesn't happen, right? And I don't think Biden gets nearly enough credit. And if you'll notice, Trump goes to the Middle East, and where does he go? He goes to Saudi, he goes to the UAE, and then he goes to Qatar. Why? Because they can give him money in exchange for favors. They can give his kids
bases.
They can give his kids buildings, golf courses, investments in his crypto thing. Where did he not go? He didn't go to Turkey or Israel. Why? Because they're democracies, and they weren't going to give him a plane. So you see my bias here politically, but I think my Jewish brothers and sisters give Trump way too much credit and give Biden not nearly enough credit. And all this bullshit on campus around you're anti-Semites and we're going to pull your funding, that is a false flag. I don't think the guy gives a good goddamn about anti-Semitism. I think he wanted the excuse to come in and neuter research at schools, go after liberal institutions, because unfortunately for an autocrat, we at universities teach people to ask a really annoying question: why? So I'm not, as you can probably tell, I'm not a fan of Trump's foreign policy, if you can even articulate what it is. I mean, Marco Rubio, to me, Secretary Rubio, I have no idea who this guy is. He used to be kind of a post-World War II, neocon, McCain. I have no idea. I would love for him to try to articulate what his view of the world was, right? Obama would at least say we need to pivot from Europe to have stronger military in Asia, whatever it might be. But what does America first mean? I just have a very difficult time understanding the foreign policy of this administration. I think Trump gets way more credit than he deserves around being so, quote unquote, a friend of Israel. And I think Biden didn't get nearly as much credit, largely because I think Vice President Harris was very mealy-mouthed about the whole issue, trying to keep her far-left base happy. And what was so interesting about this is Trump ended up getting a much bigger proportion of the Muslim vote in Michigan than everyone thought, because people said, I'd rather have someone who stabs me in the front than stabs me in the back. And all this bullshit trying to have it both ways from my side of the aisle in the Democratic Party came back to haunt us. It was a bit of a TED Talk.
And what do you think about, which I always find funny, is Trump and basically the Republican Party and the evangelicals, because the support from Israel I don't think comes down to they're great allies and they're doing all this great. It comes down to Jews have to be in Jerusalem for Jesus to come back.
Comes back.
And which is, by the way, it sounds crazy, but it is the voting bloc that votes en masse the most in America, the church, the born again, the Bible Belt.
Well, it's why Huckabee's over there, but I would suggest that any Jewish, anyone Jewish look at like, okay, what happens after that? I think
well,
like
the Jews go to hell.
I think 1,300 of us get to stick around, and then the rest go to hell.
If you talk to the Christians, like, well, they can convert if they want to convert.
Right. So I'm not sure if I'm down with this. The question for me that helps me find moral clarity is the following: what would happen if they were in charge? So there's Hamas and there's Israel. What would happen if Israel got control of our heavy artillery and Congress? We'd still have peer-reviewed research. We'd still have civil rights. We'd still have no cruel and unusual punishment. We'd have no child marriage. We'd have a democracy. I think the Knesset could take over the Congress, and for a long time we wouldn't know what had happened.
Right.
What happens if Hamas had control of our heavy artillery and Congress? What happens? My gay brothers and sisters get thrown off roofs? What happens to the women in our society? I get shot in the head. I get executed. I mean, yeah, war is terrible. We can argue about whether the response has been overdone. At some point, an occupying force has an obligation to ensure there's humanitarian aid. But you go into a superior military infrastructure and you create that kind of butchery, you are going to pay a severe price. And that's what needs to happen to create incentives to send to the rest of the world a message that you do this, it is going to be really ugly. At the end of the war in World War II, I was just in Cologne, we leveled the place, right? 80 to 90% of the people had to evacuate. In Hamburg, we killed 40,000 people towards the end of the war. They had no air defenses, no way to fight back. And they asked Eisenhower and the generals, why do you keep bombing these people? And he said, they need to know they lost. And I know that sounds cruel, but I think war by virtue of its nature is cruel. And I think we have to create an incentive system. The other question I would have for people who are really upset about what's going on in Gaza, and I empathize with it, and the majority of my friends feel this way, would we have left Nazis in Germany? Would we have said, okay, enough is enough, we're going to leave those Nazis in Germany? Would we have left them in power? And the question I would put on the other side is everyone thinks it's up to Netanyahu and the U.S. to stop the intense horror in Gaza. And let's be honest, it is horror. It is horror. The greatest concentration of child amputees now is in Gaza. It is horrific. The question is, okay, I lay that at the feet of Hamas. And that is, if they lay down their weapons and release the hostages, what do they think happens? Are we going to go in and execute them? Is Israel going to go in and round up their children and ship them off to another place? I think, quite frankly, that's when the rebuilding starts. So this is the hard part and what we're facing here that I don't think we've ever faced before. At the end of World War II, the people in charge of Germany after Hitler died said, we love our children more than we hate you guys. It's over, and the unconditional surrender. The Emperor of Japan, who was told, and the public was told he's a god, told his military to stand down because he said, we've got to stop this. What is so difficult this time is you have a theocracy that's convinced the more people that die, these people are martyrs, and they still hate their enemy more than they love their own children. And we have never dealt with that before. And it presents a quagmire that requires a certain level of critical thinking outside the traditional norms of war that, quite frankly, I'm not sure I have the brain to wrap my head around. But I get very upset when I see all this virtue signaling of people who don't give a flying about what's going on in Sudan because it's not Jews killing them, right? It seems like everyone is allowed to win a war. Jews in Israel are allowed to push back to a truce and then stop. And the question I would ask is the following. If a jihadist cartel or a fundamentalist jihadist group took over was elected democratically in Mexico, and they spent billions of dollars building tunnels and rockets, and then they incurred into Texas and said, these white Christian nationalists are terrible, they're Islamophobes, they hate us, rise up. And they went in and they took on a population-adjusted basis, right, the freshman class of SMU, 5,000 people, and hid them under tunnels in Monterey. And then before they left, right, killed the entire faculty and student body of the University of Texas at Austin before retreating with the freshman class of SMU. What the would we do? It wouldn't be Mexico. It'd be the Great Sonoran radioactive parking lot. Can you imagine what we would do? So again, it comes back to this notion. I think war is horrible. I appreciate the empathy. I think President Trump could have shown real leadership here and created a pan-Arab security force and forced Netanyahu to go into with an occupying force to ensure that the horror stops. But what I come back to is the following. What would we have done? And I think we would have, the ratio of combatant to civilian deaths in Gaza right now is 1-to-1. In World War II, it was about 70% civilians, 70 or 80, and 20 or 30% combatants. War is horrific. This war is being executed less horrifically than any other urban combat war. So I just find that there is an entirely different standard when it's Jews on one side.
Do you worry as a professor that what you say is going to have blowback with your students and or faculty? There seems to be a lot of politicization of universities.
I mean, it's not fun to be called Professor Genocide online, right?
Is that what they call you?
Oh, I get a lot of that.
Really?
Yeah, I get a lot of that. I mean, it's online, so who knows how much of it is real and how much of it is bots.
Right.
But generally speaking, universities, the faculty, so I've been living in London the last 3.5 years. I haven't taught since COVID. So what happened on campuses, I wanted no part of.
You live in London now?
Yeah, I live in London now. I didn't want to be in that environment. I generally find the faculty, my colleagues, are exceptionally open to ideas, thoughts, controversy. They're not afraid. They don't back down. Also, there's a big Jewish population in the faculty there. I find the students can say really stupid things, but they're an 18-year-old. I'm glad a camera wasn't following me around when I was 18. And this is what I find so disappointing about where we have failed in universities, and that is we have accidentally, slowly, incrementally created the zeitgeist of oppressors and the oppressed. And really thoughtful kids show up and they learn about the history of the U.S., which involves a lot of oppression, and they get angry and they go on the hunt for fake racists.
Right.
And they rise up. But a lot of them get upset and get triggered. And what I believe where we have failed to communicate, and we need to communicate in the first week of orientation, now it's all about mental health. Because these kids show up and after concierge parenting and social media, they get their first D or they get their heart broken, and they literally are a risk to themselves. So the orientations become about mental health.
Really?
Well, it's the right thing. We had to put screens up in the Bopes Library because kids were going to the 8th floor and jumping off.
Why?
They were killing themselves.
I get it, but like depression, anxiety.
We have the most depressed, anxious generation of youth in history. Hands down, and my colleague Jonathan Haidt has done amazing work on this. Kids are sequestering from their relationships because they're on the phone all the time. But I think what needs to happen, and the chancellor of Michigan State had the absolute best banner in the world on move-in day, and it said something to the effect of, if words trigger you, I need you to call your parents and ask them to come get you as you are not ready for college. College needs to be a physically safe place. It needs to be intellectually a very dangerous place.
Sure.
You're here to be offended. You're here to be triggered. And unfortunately, we've created this scenario or environment where if words offend you, you're right. Being offended means to be right. And whoever offended you is part of the oppressor group, and God help them if they have the wrong color skin or outdoor plumbing, because then they're definitely wrong. And it came from the right place of empathy and trying to protect communities that have been oppressed.
Right.
But the snake is eating its tail now.
Look, when I went to university, I mean, when you get there, you're like, I read a book, therefore I know everything.
I know, yeah.
And the sort of assurity that you have. I mean, I was a Marxist, and you're like, well, this is,
Clearly that's...
I know how to fix everything.
Yeah.
Have you heard of dialectic? Anyway, before I get into this, why you live in London?
People, it's funny, with everything that's going on, people say, oh, you left America, America's a show. I got it. I'm in London because of America, and that is, I've recognized so much incredible prosperity and good fortune because of this amazing experiment called America, that I have the opportunity to live overseas for a few years and give my kids that opportunity. So why am I living in London? Because I can. Yeah. I'm moving back sooner than I thought. I thought I was going to be there 5 years. I'm going to move back early because I'm really upset about what's going on in America.
Do you worry about your sons?
Well, I do because I'm a dad, but the reality is a lot of these problems are about money. And the best indicator, unfortunately, now in America of your kid's success is how much money you have. And there's something wrong with that. When I grew up, America loved unremarkable kids. UCLA had a 74% admissions rate when I applied. I was one of the 26% that didn't get in. My dad got me a job installing shelving, came home, was living with my mom, broke down, was really upset. Like, I always thought I was smart. I was told I was smart, and I wanted to do something bigger. At that point, I wanted to be a pediatrician. And she said, well, is there an appeal process? So I appealed. And I remember the admissions director calling me and saying, you're not qualified. I had 1130 on the SAT, 3.1 GPA from high school.
Yeah.
He said, you're not qualified, but we're going to give you a shot. And it literally inspired this upward spiral for me. So I'm a product of big government. Everyone likes to shitpost the government. California taxpayers and the regents of the University of California saved my ass.
Yeah.
Saved my ass. And I grew up, and this is a flex, but I'm going to make it. I 3 years ago gave $12 million back to UCLA.
Wow.
Right? So guess what? Taking bets on unremarkable people pays off.
For sure. I mean, people peak at different ages.
That's right.
You know, I used to get, we had this thing called Rex, which is if you got a certain grade, you could not write final exams. So you had an extra month of summer. So I just got Rex. my grades were all Rex, which was, I don't know, between 71 and 77, just mid-range. And I remember all my brother's friends were in college, and they would drink beer and have, I didn't want to be in high school anymore. So I said it was sort of the British system at that time when you, like A-levels, you go to college, and so it was grade 13, and you could just, that's all they cared about was, so I said, I'll just go to grade 13, and then I'll go to college, and this will be great, it'll be fun. And they said, yeah, you can't do that. You have to do all the other Well, no, all you need is 6th grade, 13th grade. And because, I have Irish Alzheimer's, I forget everything but my grudges. Because I was fueled by like showing them, I got the highest average in the school, and I got the Governor General's Award and all this stuff. But literally, I found out that I could be smart because I had a reason.
Yeah.
Other than the first reason was a longer summer, and now it's I can go drink beer with my buddies and not have to be in high school. So, but I say to all my friends, you don't want to peak at 16. You want that upward trajectory to start in college. So that you're like, okay, now I'm learning. And I think education just makes your life better. You don't know it at the time. You just want to get out. But like, it makes your life better the more you learn. And then when you start to make a little bit of money, then you're like, okay, I just want it all, man. I want to travel. I want to go around the world. I want to eat everything. I want to drink everything. I want to, I want to go everywhere. I want to do all this stuff. And that, I think, the problem with high school and young people is they want to peak at 16. And there's nothing worse than peaking at 16, because I used to be able to play football. I used to have a full head of hair. And it's funny, I would worry about sons, because I remember when I found out I was going to have my first daughter, I was in Libya, and I was with these crazy Mujahideen guys, and I found I was going to have a daughter, and they said, Allah has blessed you. And I'm like, that's a bit weird, because women stay with their dads for their life, and they take care of their dads. Yeah. Men go off and they start their own family, and then they sort of don't look back. Yeah. And so I'm so happy I have daughters, but also because, most men want to have boys because they're like, I can relate to them, and we can throw the ball. But when you have daughters, it's like a huge blessing, and you learn a lot from it. But I think I'd be terrified if I had sons in this day and age.
Everything you say resonates, but the reality is because we have resources and a lot of parental engagement, and I have this incredible partner, I'm not as worried about them. But 90% of the stress in our household comes from the phone. I was stupid. I let my kids on smartphones.
It's hard not to.
My son is addicted to TikTok. I'm one of those dads. One of my sons has gotten past this, but he used to take the phone into the bathroom and pretend he wasn't feeling well and be in the bathroom for an hour with his TikTok. And I jokingly used to bang on the door and say, start masturbating. But the phone is 80 to 90% of the agita between my kids and my partner. And my biggest regret from a family standpoint, I was always worried about money. I didn't want to have a lot of kids because the most frightened I've ever felt personally was when my first son came rotating out of my girlfriend. It was 2008, and I had just lost everything. I was like, I made the mistake of calling my accountant and saying, what am I worth? And he's like, well, including your mortgage, you're worth about negative $1 million right now. And that's when he came into the world. And you're supposed to feel this sense of overwhelming joy and bright lights and angelic singing. All I felt was nausea and fear. Yeah. I'm like, the first thing I felt when my son came into this world was failure. Yeah. I'm like, the one thing I'm supposed to do is provide for this kid, and I failed. And it was just an awful feeling. So I didn't want to have more than two. My biggest regret as family is I really wish I had a girl. Because I didn't realize what you said. As you get to our age, you start seeing the end or the decline. And I would just love a girl that was quite frankly, more instinctively prone to taking care of me and visiting me.
Yeah.
Because you realize what you're saying is true. My kids will meet spouses and kind of leave me. And so I think about that a lot. If I had to do it again, I would have gone for a third and tried to have a daughter. Anyways, next life.
I have two teenage, same-ish ages, two teenage girls, and then one who's 7, and it's like, Dad,
right?
Yeah, I love you.
Yeah,
and you're just like, okay. Hello, Bango, and welcome to our BetMGM lightning round. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code Shane and get up to $1,500 first bet offer today. Quick lightning round. Odds on Gen Z men earning more than their fathers. Long shot or safe money?
10% will make more than their fathers could have ever imagined, and 90% will make less.
Ooh, good answer. Nuanced. I like it. What's a bigger gamble for a 22-year-old today? Going to college, buying crypto, or joining the military?
Oh, hands down, buying crypto is the biggest gamble.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I buy Bitcoin as a store of value. I think the rest is not a good way to build wealth.
If you had to set a line, what happens first? Universal national service or universal basic income?
Universal basic income doesn't work, in my view. There should be universal minimum income, but there's no reason why you and I should get UBI. And anytime, I'm good friends with Andrew Yang, I just invested in his company. Anytime you ask 2 or 3 questions in about how do we finance this, it falls apart.
Right.
National service, mandatory national service. Young people need to get out there and see that people from different sexual orientations, income classes are great Americans. And they need to be doing it in the agency of taking care of seniors, being smoke jumpers into fires, working in the military, healthcare. Great Americans need to see how wonderful other Americans are. And we need young people to realize I'm not identified by my sexual orientation, the color of my skin, where my dad went to school. I'm identified by one thing. I'm an American. That needs to be restored. And if you look at the greatest legislation and the greatest levels of happiness in our country, it was in the 50s and 60s when the majority of our leaders had all served in the same uniform in the military. I think there are a few things we could do that would arrest this decline in happiness and well-being. 1 out of 2 people our age feel really good to be Americans. It's 1 out of 10 young people. Mandatory national service. Doesn't have to be the military, but you're doing something in the agency of helping other great Americans surrounded by other great Americans.
Mm-hmm. So I know the answer to this probably, but the better long-term bet to fix men, therapy, fatherhood, or national service?
National service.
There we go. Okay, we're getting to it. Last one, over or under? How many of your own rules for men would your sons actually follow?
I hope a lot. What I hope is as you get older, you realize your kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes feel like I'm not living up to, I've built this image of what it is to be a man, and quite frankly, I have a lot of insecurity that I don't live up to those. I talk a big game, I'm not sure I'm living up to the code I've outlined.
I want to get to how crazy you think you get, or are you getting less crazy as you get older?
I think I have better perspective, but I have trouble disarticulating my anger and depression from what is intuition about how bad things are. Mm-hmm. So I look at the murder of Charlie Kirk, and it just really took me down for a few days. Mm-hmm. I thought it felt like a precursor of some sort of omen of something really awful. Mm-hmm. And I have trouble discerning. I struggle with anger and depression, so I can see the glass half full very easily. And I have trouble now discerning, do I have spidey sense and intuition about America going, to me, America feels very reminiscent of Germany like 1933, 1934.
I was going to say Yugoslavia post-Tito. Everyone's got a machine gun and everyone's got beef.
Yeah. Failing young men, nationalism. I feel like we're one economic shock away from a pretty ugly scenario here. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how much of that is that I'm darker as I get older. But at the same time, I'm smart enough now to know how I bounce out of it. When I go in, I don't know if you struggle with this, but I struggle with anger and depression, and I can feel myself going down. I start thinking about the Holocaust. I start withdrawing. I start role-playing confrontations with people that don't exist. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm going dark. Yeah. But now I'm old enough to know what I need to do, and I have this thing that hopefully will resonate with your listeners called SCAFA, S-C-A-F-A. First thing I do is I sweat. Exercise for me is my antidepressant. I'm not feeling good, go sweat. Clean. Try not to eat out, not a lot of salt, not a lot of trans fat, try and eat clean. abstinence. I love alcohol. I love THC.
Yeah.
I'm really good at it.
I'm writing this down.
I'm a better version of me, a little bit up. I've gotten more out of alcohol than it's gotten out of me.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill quote.
Me too.
But when I'm dark, I just cut that off for a little while.
Yeah.
F family. Being around my boys, my dogs, my partner is restorative for me, and affection. I try to be around my dogs. I'll even tell my kids, I'm not feeling great. They'll throw their legs on mine. We watch TV. Human touch with my dogs is very restorative for me. And so I try and focus on those things and reverse the downward spiral and try and get it moving back up. But I have blessings of this, Shane, and I have mood of this. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, I wrote a book on it. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to recalibrate those things. But I struggle as I get older because the good news about getting older is you get more thoughtful. The bad news is you get more thoughtful.
Yeah.
I think some of the going on right now is really frightening.
Yeah.
And it rattles me. It never used to, I didn't care before. Now it kind of like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the murder of Charlie Kirk, I just went, oh yeah, I can't believe that happened. Back to me. Now it affects my sleep, affects my mood. So am I getting more mindful or more crazy? I think the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah, I have a thing that I do, which is from Stutz, the great shrink, and he has this thing called golden flow. And basically, when you get anxiety or depression, you picture like a golden flow going, and you put in the golden flow from your heart to your brain, and you put in things that you're thankful for. It doesn't have to be. It could be like water. I have a bed, sheets, whatever. Your kids, dogs, and all of a sudden, the sort of anxiety sort of melts away without a pill, without anything. And the reason why I bring that up is it basically shows you what's important, what's really important to you. So in a way, it simplifies everything because you're like, that's what I should be paying the most attention to because it's what I'm the most grateful for. And everything else is noise. Yet at the same time, you're like, well, it's 3 a.m. and I'm sitting here doing this because I'm thinking about exactly like you were saying. I'm having arguments with people that don't exist.
That don't happen. Yeah.
I'm going through scenarios. Like I think we're both strategic thinkers, and so you're just going through strategies that are useless and worthless, and you worry about stuff that there's no point in
no control over.
That's why I just asked because I think when you say certain things, it provides me a little glimpse into your psyche, and I'm like, are you doing? But also like we're at this age now where I forget the term, but like you're worried about your parents and they're getting sick, but your kids too are now at a point when, like parenting when they're 5 is different than parenting when they're 15. I think that it requires a lot more thought because 5 is like feed them and make sure they don't die and
keep them away from bodies of water. That's
exactly.
About it. Yeah.
And 15 is like, okay, don't be a bad person, which is harder. Anyway, to get into that, notes on being a man. So you have 2 sons. I have 3 daughters. I believe we're a grand evolutionary experiment. That's got to have been your reason for writing Notes on Being a Man. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so look, I don't think there's any cohort that's fallen further faster than young men. 4 times more likely to kill themselves, 3 times more likely to be addicted or homeless, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. And I started seeing this evidence everywhere. A young man, the thing that triggered it for me, a young man named Alex Kearns got these errant messages from Robinhood saying he owed $700,000. Ended up it was wrong. Furiously trying to email the company to figure out what was going on, couldn't get a response back, left a note for his family saying he didn't want to burden them, throws himself in front of a train.
Yeah.
And I think we live in an economy now where 40% of the S&P by market cap has a vested interest in sequestering people from offline relationships and commanding so much attention and potentially the best way to capture their attention. We used to think that sex sells. You're a marketing guy and a brand guy, and what we found, or the algorithms figured out, is actually there's something better than sex, and that's rage. And so we have the most valuable companies in the world are essentially some form of attention addiction or rage machines. And young men with less developed prefrontal cortices, a lack of economic and romantic opportunities, are become exceptionally vulnerable to these companies that have godlike technology and infinite capital. So we've been talking about Charlie Kirk.
Instagram,
Reddit,
TikTok,
the list goes on. We've been talking about Charlie Kirk, and the majority of our political capital and energy is trying to figure out a way to interpret the font on shell casings to blame the other side. So the far left wants to blame the far right wants to blame the far left. And the question is, well, What happens if you're successful and can convince America it was their fault? That's just more violence. And it's a false and hollow debate, because I think the data reflects that it's really three things. One, all of these shooters, mass shooters, and all perpetrators of political violence are men. Almost all of them are young men. And they go on, and then the second thing is they're extremely online. They sequester from their relationship with their dad, friends, church, sports leagues, after school programs. They just go extremely online, and there's a profit motive in taking them to more extreme viewpoints to keep them engaged, and whatever's required to keep them online. Even AI, oh, I'm going on Shane Smith. What do you think, what is he going to talk about? These things. Would you like me to come up with some storylines? Would you like some pithy jokes? Would you like, and you just, fucking 2 hours later, I'm still on AI after what I thought was going to be a 2-minute hit, right? So what does it do? The number of young people, the amount of time young people spend with their friends has been cut in half. Church attendance is way down. I'm a rabid atheist, but I think the decline in religious institutions is real bad for us. After school programs, athletics. So we have young men doing really poorly. And then the third thing, the third leg of the stool around this political violence is just access to guns. Full stop, in my view. There's just way too many, access is way too easy. I see young men struggling, and I'd like to think most single-parent homes outside of Sweden, a lack of economic and romantic possibilities for young men. So I think every young man needs a code. They can get that code from their family, they can get it from religion, they can get it from work maybe, they can get it from the military, but everyone needs help trying to figure out, I'm faced with hundreds of decisions each day, what are some guideposts? And I think that a modern aspirational vision of masculinity can serve as a guidepost. And for me, and I go much deeper into the book, it comes down to three legs of the stool. Provider. We talked a little bit about this. I think every young man should assume he's going to need to be economically viable. You got to have a plan. I'm not saying you need to go to Harvard or go to work for KKR. But you got to have a plan, and you got to work towards that plan, and you got to realize that that involves sacrifice and just a lot of hard work. You got to show up. And if you have a smartphone, you can make money, right? And the way you make a lot of money is by making a little bit, because you'll get a taste for the flesh. You'll start figuring out, why does this bartender get bigger tips than me? Well, what if I took a little bit of money and I started investing it in Vanguard? You know, you start to get a taste for the flesh of money, and it's intoxicating, and you start to get good at it. Being a provider. Two, being a protector. Your default operating system should be to break up fights at bars, not start them. You know, the most—
Make sure your partner's never hungry or cold.
Hungry or cold, 100%. Make sure that, you know, the most masculine jobs, firemen, cop, military, what do? They're in the business of protection. And it's not just physical. If someone's posting other people or criticizing them, your default operating system should be to not say anything and potentially protect them. You may not like the trans community. You may not think it makes any sense to have transgender women showing up at swim meets. You may not agree that we need laws with a third bathroom. But if you see a community being demonized, your first inclination should be to protection. And then the third thing, and this is more controversial, is procreator. I think it's okay to be really fucking horny, as long as it translates into, I want to be a better man. I want to demonstrate kindness. I want to go to the gym. I want to shower. I want to get someone with better taste than me to dress me. I want to have the resilience to go up to a stranger at a bar and try and open. And if they're not interested, we're both going to be fine. 48% of men 18 to 24 have never asked a woman out in person.
See, I find that crazy.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Because those same skills, demonstrating kindness, excellence, personal grooming, having a rap, humor, resilience, right? Those are the same skills that are going to serve you well across a variety of things in your life. So I feel like we have a series of men who have, at the hands of big tech, been told they can have a reasonable facsimile of life online with an algorithm. And the whole point, real victory is a function of failure, right? Approaching women politely, making them feel safe, they're not interested, you're both going to be fine. And then when you find someone who's interested in you, that is victory. You apply to 25 jobs that you're not qualified for. You apply to another 25, rejection, and then you get an interview, you get a job. That is victory, right? That's the whole point. And I think what we have is a group of men who are becoming less mammalia. I think we're evolving a new species of asocial, asexual males. You put an orca in a tank alone, it goes crazy. The worst thing you can do to a human is solitary confinement. If you have dogs, The worst thing you can do to a dog is leave it alone without another dog for it literally goes crazy. We are taking young men who are up against the most talented, deep-pocketed people in the world who are trying to convince them all you need is a screen, right? Why would you go through the effort of trying to establish friends in the pecking order when you have Reddit and Discord? Why would you put on a tie, not get high, or drink and show up to an office when you can make money trading on Robinhood or with crypto? And for God's sakes, why would you go through the effort of trying to demonstrate excellence to a potential romantic partner when you have porn? So I think slowly but surely we have this group of young men sequestering from society that have no guardrails in the form of relationships and are slowly but surely getting anxious. I don't want to say going crazy, because the majority of young men that are extremely online will not pick up a gun. And there's this movement, there's this bias against men. There's a level of misandry here that people don't even want to acknowledge. There's this movement on TikTok where young women are saying, I'm no longer dating because they can unalive me. That's a big thing, unalive. The guy, if you go on a date with a man, right, he is 16 times more likely to go home and hurt himself than hurt you, right? Young men are hurting people, they're hurting themselves. And social media, one of the things that my colleague Jonathan Haidt has done great peer-reviewed research on is that social media, it encourages girls to start self-harming, it encourages young men to self-harming, and occasionally a small splinter of those men start harming other people. But I think that protector, provider, procreator, and then what I'd say is the umbrella kind of philosophy around what it means to be a man. It's not about a certain age, a religious ceremony, having a family. I think there's a lot of males that grow up and never become men, or age and never become men. I think the true test of manhood comes down to this term surplus value. You create more tax revenue than you've absorbed from the government. You listen to more complaints than you complain, right? You protect more people. You're a better father to your kids than your dad was to you, right? You build more jobs than jobs you're creating. I tell my kids, I'm like, you're negative value. You got teachers working so hard for you, you're not giving them a lot of value.
Right.
We're spending a ton of money on you, you're not making any money from me right now. We give you so much love, quite frankly, we get reward from you, we don't got to love back. Your job is to start figuring out ways.
Kids, sorry?
15 and 18.
Oh, there you go.
But surplus value. So wrote this book. I'm hoping it appeals to young men and to single mothers who are looking for something where they can better understand their men and start setting up, certain guideposts. I'm not an endocrinologist. I'm not an adolescent psychiatrist, so I talk about it through the lens of my own personal experiences, mostly my own shortcomings as a younger man or a younger person where I wasn't a man. But I think it's a good time to think, okay, masculinity is a wonderful thing. When Russian troops come pouring over the border in Ukraine, we want some of that big dick energy. There's an award called the Carnegie Award that rewards valor. This is people rushing into burning homes. In other words, you sacrifice your own person and well-being to try and save someone else. There were 81 awards last year, 77 went to men. There are some wonderful things about the right type of aspirational masculinity, wanting to protect, wanting to provide, wanting to procreate. Let's stop demonizing it. Let's get rid of the word toxic masculinity. There's cruelty, there's sexual abuse, there's violence, but masculinity is a wonderful thing. And I like to think that young men can lean into it. Be really fucking strong, work out, take care of yourself, such that you can break up fights at bars, such that you can protect your country, such that you can be more attractive to a woman who's higher character or more impressive than you. These are wonderful things. And you know who wants, in my view, more masculine men and wants more economically and emotionally viable men? Women, right? 80% of women say they still expect men to initiate romantic contact while making them feel safe. And men are not approaching women. They're not. 60% of 30-year-olds used to have one child in the house. Now it's 27%. I mean, women are literally giving up on men because I don't know if you've had this experience. I have women complaining to me in bars that men don't approach them.
Yeah, I think people are seeing, hey, we're having a complete societal change here, and no one's really chronicling it or putting up their hand and saying, I mean, to go back to our point is when you're in college, you're like, oh, the more money I have, the more attractive I become, kind of thing. And so you make money. And I think it becomes more difficult to make money. It becomes harder to buy a house because BlackRock's buying up all the houses. You start retreating and you start, spending more time on social media, gaming, what have you. At the same time, you have kind of we were talking about the mercenary Russians, you have kind of a mercenary move to this sort of OnlyFans, monetized sexuality, which is aspirational. Everybody wants the PJ, everyone wants the boat, everyone wants the Dubai or the London or the Paris or the, here it is. That's the 1%. Yeah. And the girls are like, I want that 1%. I want the lifestyle, or at least the photos of the lifestyle or the thing. And you have guys going, well, how the hell am I going to do that kind of thing? And so there's confusion. And at the same time, politically, there's been this sort of, as you said, and I think you look at men retreating and the sort of sexuality of economics becoming skewed.
Well, women made horizontally and up. Men socioeconomically horizontally and down. And when the pool of horizontal and up keeps shrinking, there's just less mating.
Yeah.
And a key component of masculinity in this age is to recognize that women's ascent, to their credit, the far right recognize the problem, or the right recognize the problem sooner than other people. The problem is their solution is to go back to the 50s where women and non-whites had fewer opportunities. Women's ascent is not the cause of men's descent. In many ways, it's kind of saved our asses, because without women entering the workforce, we wouldn't have done as well. Civil rights didn't hurt white people. Gay marriage doesn't hurt heteronormative marriage. It's not a zero-sum game. There are still huge challenges facing women, especially once they have kids in the work world. We should celebrate the incredible progress of women. More single women own homes in the U.S. now than single men. Good for them. Go after it. I wish my mom had more economic security.
Me too, yeah.
It created a lot of anxiety in our household because without a college degree, my mom could be a travel agent or a real estate agent or a secretary. And she didn't have the sales skills to be an agent, so she was a secretary. It sounds like your mom. So that's wonderful. And when I know a man has really lost the script is when he starts blaming women for his romantic problems or immigrants for his economic problems. So I think but the thing, when I started talking about this stuff 5 years ago, I was immediately labeled a misogynist or Andrew Tate with an MBA, and the dialogue has dramatically pivoted to something much more positive. And the biggest supporters of this dialogue have in fact been mothers. Like, I'm a feminist. I got 3 kids in my house, 2 daughters, 1 son. 1 daughter's at Penn, the other's in PR in Chicago, and my son is in the basement vaping and playing video games. Not approaching women, not involved in anything.
Yeah.
And so we have to recognize this is a problem. This is not a zero-sum game. That men have to realize that their sisters and their mothers doing well is a huge victory. But at the same time, women also have to realize, especially young women in this online environment, the general view of the left and sometimes younger women is young men don't have problems, they are the problem. And we have to keep in mind that the disproportionate unearned advantage that you and I recognized, from 1945 to now, America's recognized more economic prosperity than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
And then we crammed it all into 1/3 of the American population, and that is people who are white heterosexual males. We had gale force wins in our sales. Guilty. 100%.
Yes, correct.
19-year-old male, that is no longer the case.
Correct.
So the question is, should he be paying the price and penalized for our privilege? And they are really struggling. You go into a morgue with 5 kids who died by suicide, 4 are men.
Yeah.
2 15-year-olds, 15-year-old boy, 15-year-old girl, both sexually abused. No one crime is less heinous than the other, but the boy is 10 times more likely to kill himself later in life. What the studies show is that while boys are physically stronger, they're neurologically and emotionally much weaker. When there is an absence of a male role model, either through death, abandonment, or divorce, the boy at that moment in that home becomes more likely to be incarcerated than graduate from college. Whereas girls will tend to be more promiscuous because they look for male attention in the wrong places. But in terms of high school attendance, college graduation, and earnings, mostly the same. There's this trope that, the tragedy is this cartoon of a woman in her 30s who never found romantic love and is living alone with her cats. She's just fine. The person who's really hurt with a lack of relationships is a young man. If a young man hasn't been married or cohabitated with a partner by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to be a substance abuser. Men need relationships and guardrails much more than women. Widows are happier after their husband dies, widowers less happy. Men in relationships live 4 to 7 years longer. Women also live longer, but only 2 to 4 years. We, and especially young men, need relationships much more than women. And the problem is men of our generation aren't stepping up. We're in New York. There are 3 times as many women in New York applying to be big sisters than there are men applying to be big brothers. And I think it's a couple things. One, there's this taboo that because of the Catholic Church and Michael Jackson, that if you maybe don't have your own family, that if you want to get involved with a 15-year-old's life, there's something wrong with you. Yeah. Maybe you're a pedophile. No, that's not true at all. There's a lot of wonderful men out there with love to give, paternal and fraternal love. The other thing is this self-consciousness that if I'm not the CEO of a company or not a baller, that I can't add value to a young man's life. As someone who coaches young men, it is so easy to add value. Just taking an interest in their life, just telling them not to move to Alaska when they have a good job, as I did today. A guy in Pennsylvania has decided he wants to move to Alaska. Just ask him a few questions. Just taking an interest in it is so easy to add value, and there are young men everywhere. Seek out the single woman and the single mother in your office. Find out if your friends are having trouble with their sons. It's weird. Sons who are teens are more inclined to listen to your friends than they are to you.
Yeah.
So I think that there's absolutely addressable issues here. More men in K through 12, more freshman seats at college, more money for vocational programming. Stop this regressive tax rate that taxes young people more. 8 million homes in 10 years such that people can afford to move into a home. I would like to see mandatory national service. I was just in Israel, met with a battalion at IDF. All these beautiful young men and women learning how to handle weapons, count on each other for their lives, serving the agency of something bigger. And by the way, lowest levels of young adult depression of any democracy, Israel, despite all the threats, right? So I think there's a ton of things we can do to address this problem. And also, regulate social media. Remove Section 230 protection for algorithmically elevated content to make them liable for rage. I'm not into censorship. You want to say an mRNA vaccine alters your DNA? Fine. But don't elevate it beyond its organic reach because it pisses people off and creates more comments. These are all addressable, common sense solutions, and the incumbents want to create this illusion of complexity that these problems are much bigger. No, they're not. We can absolutely address these problems.
I saw you recently with Kara Swisher, and you were like, I don't know, I'm on the road, I'm lonely, and I don't have my kids, I don't have the dog. You get lonely?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You're a busy guy, you're thinking, you're doing...
I get depressed. The problem is I like being alone too much, and then all of a sudden I wake up and I realize like I'm not doing well, that I need to be around other people. I can pretty easily just sequester. When I first moved to New York, I didn't like
where?
I was in San Francisco,
okay.
And I was working in tech, and I'd made some money. I didn't like my life. I didn't like tech. I didn't like being married. Came back to New York, and I thought, these are my people. Work hard, play hard. I'm about money. I'm about drinking, about having a good time.
Yeah.
And I bought a loft, and I remember thinking at one point, like I would only leave my loft for food or in the pursuit of sex. I could work from home. I was teaching a couple times a week. I had enough money that I thought I was wrong. I thought I had enough money not to work again. And then I realized, I'd read a lot of stuff. I'm like, I'll die in my 50s like this, not having contact with people. And so I made an effort to get out and re-engage with my friends, but I'm a little bit too comfortable being alone. What I miss is where I get lonely is I get sometimes, and this triggers a depression, if I'm not around my kids, I start thinking I lack purpose. My mind goes weird places. So I would say, I don't know, I have trouble discerning from getting lonely or being depressed because I am really comfortable being alone.
Yeah.
I have to force myself to go out because I realize how unhealthy it is reading all this about touching grass and relationships. So what I've said to people, I say, I'm a yes to everything with the right to cancel for a good reason.
Right.
I'm trying to get out, trying to invest more in friendships.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But yeah, I get down, I should say.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of times on podcasts, it's like the same thing. It's like, you have to work out, or you have to do this, or you have to do. And I'm like, it's so much physician heal thyself. It's like so many people saying, you don't have to. I have to do this to sort of, And so, yeah, I think there's a difference, to me anyways, between being lonely and loneliness, and then just left to your own brain, which fills you with sort of anxiety or depression or things like that. And it's interesting that you're very honest about that, and it's one of the things that I like about listening to you, and I think that's phenomenal. Anyway, I haven't even gotten to any of my questions.
There you go.
Because we've just been going for it. Speaking of our children, which I think about a lot, anxious, money and anxiety and depression. Speaking as an old Marxist, the synthesis of communism, the synthesis of AI is all human endeavor done by machines, which means, I forget who said this, but work satisfies need, desire, and sanity. Right? We need to work or we go bonkers. Soon, AI will be doing the majority of work. So everyone talks about, universal wage and all this stuff. And what happens when you take work out of the equation for a generation of young people, i.e. my youngest daughter, who's going to grow up in the fully synthesized AI world?
Whenever there's a new technology, there's a lot of catastrophizing. And what I would say is you don't necessarily need work to be a healthy human being. You need to have purpose. And sometimes your purpose can be art or nonprofit or mothering or fathering. So I just think you need purpose and something to do and a reason to get up and a feeling that you're adding value, right? I don't buy that AI is going to do everything for us. I think it's every technology in history, there's catastrophizing that it's going to put people out of work. When automation came along in the automobile industry, it was just a given that there was going to be no employment in the automotive industry. And what were we going to do with all these people in Detroit and Michigan? And in the short run, there was some job destruction on the factory floor, but we couldn't envision heated seats or car stereos. And it ended up creating additional margin, productivity, and new products. And now I believe there's more employment now in the global auto industry than there was pre-automation. Every technology has been the same way. The Queen tried to outlaw milling or weaving machines because weavers were that was the biggest job of women in the UK at the time. So she wanted to get, there's been Luddites all along trying to destroy the machines. So I don't see any reason why. I think the disruption will come faster here. I would hate to be a mediocre lawyer right now. I was my first job out of UCLA, I was an analyst at Morgan Stanley. I think the 2 years of work I did there would probably be about 3 or 4 months now. That's being generous to me. So there's going to be certain industries where you're going to see, I think, a pretty serious destruction. I went to see the Fantastic Four. 3,400 people worked on it. I got to think that Ellison, once he comes in and buys Warner Brothers and all these movie studios, he's going to take it down to 300 people using AI.
For sure.
But that'll free up margin, opportunities, new ideas. So I don't see any reason why, like other technologies, it shouldn't create more jobs in the medium and long term. The disruption here will probably be more severe, and the V will be deeper, faster. And what America is really bad at is reducing the anxiety of people and retraining them. So Denmark spends like 2.1% of GDP on retraining and upskilling. We spend like 0.1 or 0.2. We're not good at taking care of, quote unquote, the people on the wrong end of disruption. But I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities. I mean, look at healthcare. Biggest industry in the world is U.S. healthcare, but 4 out of 5 people are dissatisfied with it. A woman whose child suffers from diabetes spends 5 months, and let's be honest, so is the mom spends 5 months of her year focused on that child's diabetes. Specialists, arguing with the insurance company, referrals, going to the pharmacy. There'll be layers, an agentic layer on top of AI that a bunch of entrepreneurs will come up with that'll be for moms with diabetic kids, and they'll create new jobs, new companies. So I'm actually a bit of an AI optimist, and that our kids are going to find. I don't think AI is the biggest threat. I think loneliness and a tax policy that basically transfers money from our kids to us. Old people have figured out a way to vote themselves more money. People over the age of 70 are 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. People under the age of 30 are 24% less wealthy. And the incumbents will say things like network effects or technology. It's bullshit. We keep lowering taxes on really rich people. Corporations are paying the lowest taxes since 1939. The top 25 wealthiest Americans are paying an average annual tax of 6%. And we keep finding ways to my industry. We have an incentive. What happens when the dean stands up and says, we rejected 90% of our applicants? What does the faculty do? They applaud, which in my mind is tantamount to the head of a homeless shelter bragging they turned away 90% of people last night.
Yeah.
What do we do as soon as we move into Malibu? We get very concerned with traffic once we own a home, show up to the local review board, no more housing.
Locals only.
And so what do we have? We have basically the incumbents want to make it harder to get college degrees or buy a home, which is the primary means of advancement and saving money. So the cost of a home's gone from $290 to $420 from 2019 to now. The cost of a degree has gone absolutely crazy. And the admissions rate of Vanderbilt this year is going to be 4%. It's going to be lower than Harvard. And by the way, Harvard has $53 billion endowment. It lets in 1,500 kids. I just interviewed the president of Dartmouth. They have an $8 billion endowment, and they let in 1,100 kids. And they're in the middle of nowhere. They could expand it to 5,000. But we have decided in education that we're not public servants, that we're Chanel bags.
Well, why?
It's prestige, and it makes it's money. I get paid more if I create a luxury brand through artificial scarcity such that I can increase my margins faster than LVMH. Should it really cost $500,000 to get a degree at NYU? Well, I like it. I can hire 17 people for every one that teaches MIT. Why? Create artificial scarcity, right? Such that we can continue to raise prices faster than inflation because it becomes self-expressive benefit. It becomes aspirational. These are the new luxury brands. The ultimate sign of your success is if you send your kid to an elite school and you can afford it.
Because it's still like a curriculum. That's the funny thing I learned about university is it's high school, but with more freedom, because undergrad is still just a curriculum.
Yeah, it's what it is we don't educate people, we certify them. We make sure that you're mentally healthy, that you can play well with others. We help you find a mate, and for the rest of your life, we help indicate that, all right, if you went to an elite school, you're reasonably good. And corporations are willing to pay a massive premium for that certainty, which all reverse engineers back to everybody wanting to send their kid to Duke or what have you. The unfortunate thing, it's gone out of control. I'm not suggesting that Harvard should let in everybody, but if you have over $1 billion in endowment and you're not growing your freshman class faster than population growth, you should lose your tax-free status because you're no longer a public servant. You're a hedge fund offering classes.
There you go. Yeah. And where does everybody go?
Well, what happens is, it's really mendacious. First off, we all raise our tuition at the exact same rate. We're all charging the same amount. Good kids get arbed down to second-tier schools where they pay the same tuition. So what ends up happening to the majority of American households that don't know someone on the board, or their kid isn't freakishly remarkable at 17, they end up paying a Mercedes price for a Hyundai product, massive student debt, which, by the way, is one of the few forms of debt that is not dischargeable. You want evidence that we're f***ing young people? You and I really mess up and we go all in on some dumb idea and we get in over our skis. We declare bankruptcy, second chance. Some kid has been told his whole life, you need to go to college, and a nice woman with a pantsuit and a logo behind her says, always invest in yourself, and convinces a kid to take out $100,000 in student debt. They decide they don't like it. They decide it's not for them. Don't get the degree. That $100,000 is with them the rest of their lives. Can you imagine the mental toll that takes on a 20-year-old? Right? So we have purposely decided to transfer wealth and opportunity from the young to the old. And the greatest intergenerational theft in history was COVID, where it's like, well, 1 million people would be bad, but what would be tragic is if Shane and Scott's stocks went down. So we flushed $7 trillion into the market, 85% of which wasn't spent, means it wasn't needed. Took stocks up, took homes up. So if you owned a home in Malibu, if you owned a ton of stocks, champagne and cocaine. But if you wanted the natural part of the cycle that's been key to transferring wealth back from old people to young people, 2008, economic crisis, we bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. I got to buy Netflix, Amazon, and Apple for $8, $10, and $12 a share. Apple's at $200, Amazon's at $250, Netflix is at $1,200. Where does a young person find disruption now? When you bail out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant, you're just robbing opportunity from the 25-year-old recent grad of Culinary Academy.
Yeah, it's worse than that, Jim. He's dead, because in 2008, you have the housing crisis, and BlackRock, there's a guy there, famously, a mathematician, who just looked at the debt and said, okay, well, it's 9 cents on the dollar. We can't not make money. They didn't even care what it was. It happened to be houses, but they didn't care.
Yeah.
So they bought the debt, and then they rented out the properties, and they made so much money, because America's built on real estate, so the tax and the tax benefit for BlackRock was huge, and so they're renting, and then, I don't know, 15, they sold all the things, and some bright penny said, this was the number one most profitable thing we've ever done in the history of BlackRock. So they said, we should do more of this. Let's buy every home that we can possibly buy in America.
Yeah.
So if you're a young person with $100,000 of debt, you're getting out saying, by the way, you know why I was a Marxist in Ottawa, Canada? Because I was like, $35,000 for a car, that's more money than there is in the world, $35,000. How do you get $35,000 to buy a car? Like, who owns cars? That's crazy, you know? Yeah. And I remember I gave a speech when I graduated from college, and I was like, I've already lived in the nicest house I'm ever going to live in and driven the nicest car, because it was my parents, and so we were just going to have no money. And to go back to your thing, we did have the winds pushing our sails. I worry about young people, men and women, coming out and saying, okay, I'm completely, speaking of Marxism, I'm completely disenfranchised. Mm-hmm. I'm in debt. I can't buy a house. We have disruption in AI. And to go back to the other side, Smith and Ricardo, yeah, the coal miners will just become winemakers because of the market forces. Well, some will die off because the coal mining will take 20 years to turn into winemaking. That's what's going to happen, my opinion. I agree with you, because it's going to be a wealth creator, which is going to lead to, I believe, between quantum and AI, a higher disproportion of wealth, because the people in California will just, and the people in West Virginia are not getting that AI and quantum pop. But so you have these young people, and to go back to you, you know, the scariest thing is a young, lonely, disenfranchised person. Imagine a generation of disenfranchised people who can't have the American dream of a house, a family. We are a grand evolutionary experiment. Well, you're not allowed, because economically, talking about you, what was your greatest fear in your life? That I'm sitting in the bath going, I just had a kid and I can't pay for it. Imagine you can't pay for any of it.
Well, it's the reason why Trump is president. If you look at the three cohorts that pivoted hardest from blue to red, it was, first and foremost, it was Latinos who don't want to be identified as a group.
Sure.
Latinos in South Florida have much different views than Mexican Americans in LA.
No.
So, and then number two was people under the age of 30. They're like, this isn't working for me. I can't afford a home. For the first time, if you want to reverse engineer the single data point that is ground zero for America's problems right now, it's the following. For the first time in American history, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. That's never happened in our history. That creates rage and shame in the household. You're a 30-year-old and you're not living as good a life as your parents.
Well, I read some stat that you had, which is there's like 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 30-year-olds still live with their parents.
1 in 5 men at the age of 30 live with their parents. 1 in 3 under the age of 23.
Which is humiliating.
Yeah, and you have your roommates reminding you every day of your failure. So, so you have, I mean, there's just a lack, and it's in the face of unprecedented prosperity. And 210 times a day, they get a notification, a reminder that there's someone they know on a Gulfstream or in Ibiza partying. It's like, let me get this. Everyone seems to be...
With all the girls, to go back to our original.
Everyone else in the world seems to be partying and doing amazing, except for me.
Yeah.
So I'll go extremely online. I'll sequester from my friends. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. And then I have people online telling me it's not my fault. Mm-hmm. It's a woman's fault. It's immigrants' fault. So the second group that pivoted hardest from blue to red was young people. And then the third group was women age 45 to 64. And my thesis is that's their mothers. Because there's still a lot of women in America who will vote for what they perceive as is in the best interest of their husbands and their sons. And if you're a mom and your son isn't doing well and is a good kid, you don't give a flying about territorial sovereignty in Ukraine or transgender rights.
Yeah.
All you know is your kid isn't doing well. And that means the ultimate compact between you and America has been broken, and you want the chaos agent. And Vice President Harris was just seen as the incumbent. So if you want to know why, I mean, a lot of people wonder, how on earth did this guy become president? Very simple. We continue to transfer money from young people to old people. And young people will primarily vote based on economic interests, especially young men. And that's dynamic. That goes back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. The reason why broadcast news is dying and your podcast is blowing up is that the average person watching MSNBC is a 70-year-old white woman. She knows who she's voting for, right? The average podcast listener is a 34-year-old male. He swings back and forth, Republican and Democrat, based on pretty much, he's concerned about women's rights. He's concerned. We Democrats thought bodily autonomy was going to be the issue, and I'm not saying it shouldn't have been. That didn't show up. What showed up is, who do I believe is going to change a system that is not working for me economically? And if I can't afford a house, and if I can't find a romantic partner, and I don't have the option economically to have kids, this shit ain't working. And I don't care who's in office and what their background is, whether you like them or not, what their policies are. I just want change. So why did we elect Trump? Because a 30-year-old can't afford to buy a home.
Yeah. I wanted to say, like, a lot of times when I listen to you, I'm fascinated by economics. Wow, Professor Galloway said Reddit is undervalued. If you're going to have a long play, it's Reddit.
Right.
So we quote you. So I just want to give you the kudos
you.
there. Let's talk about being addicted to money.
Well, everyone has a certain amount of addiction. I think everybody has a certain level of addiction. And it's a natural instinct. When we came off the savannah, there was a dearth of sugary, salty, fatty foods.
So we love it.
So we have obesity. There was a lack of mating opportunities. Only 40% of men throughout history have propagated, 80% of women. So we get addicted to porn. Everyone has a certain level of addiction. And the idea is, loosely speaking, you continue to do something or be focused on it despite the fact it negatively impacts the rest of your life. I think everyone should do an assessment of their addictions. I drink a ton of alcohol, but I'm not addicted to it. I uploaded all of my blood work and everything into ChatGPT and Anthropic, and it came back and said drink less. And I've been able to drink less, and it's a bummer, but I'm able to do it. My two addictions are, one, to the affirmation of strangers. I'm more concerned about what people say on me on Threads sometimes than having a good relationship with my kids that weekend. And I become in my head about it.
Sure.
And it destroys my presence with my kids. So I would argue that's an addiction. I'm too concerned with what people think of me I don't know. And it starts to infringe on my presence with people who I love and love me. I would describe that as an addiction. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And I had, not a traumatic event, but an event that happens to a lot of Americans. My mom, who raised me on her own, single immigrant mother, lived and died a secretary, got very, very sick with cancer. And quite frankly, I was 25 in graduate school, and I didn't have the money to take care of her. And you see up close and personal the flaws of capitalism and what it means to feel vulnerable and like someone who's not being a man. When you can't take care of your mom,
disenfranchised.
Right? Oh God, it was like I get upset just thinking about it. So at that moment, I thought I'd kind of been sleepwalking through life to that point. I thought, okay, money is really important, and I can control one thing. I'm going to work really hard, and I'm not exaggerating. From 25 to 45, I did nothing but work. I wasn't trying to save the whales. I wasn't trying to be a better person. I wasn't trying to find my passion. I was trying to get economic security. Full stop. That has been my focus, and I've been on this hamster wheel of economic security. When I sold my company 10 years ago, I'm done, unless I really f*** up, and I have f***ed up before. I've been rich 3 times, and that means I've gone broke twice. But I'm smarter this time. I'm much more diversified, no more than 3 or 4% of my assets in any one thing. But I still am really seduced, hungry for, and very focused on money. And it's gotten to the point where I probably don't need to be working this much. I don't need to be thinking as much about money. I check my stocks 6 or 8 times a day.
I do 60.
And I think it's important to be really focused on money as a young person, especially as a young man, because I think women are disproportionately evaluated on their aesthetics and men are disproportionately evaluated on their economics. In a capitalist society, you're just going to have much more opportunity and an absence of stress with economic security. So I write a lot about young men and masculinity, and I'm like, young man's got to have a plan. He's got to, and that plan can be going to vocational school to figure out how to install energy efficient heaters, whatever it is. You got to have a plan for economic viability. And by the way, sometimes economic viability is being a great partner and being more supportive of your girlfriend or wife who's better at this money thing than you, or moving to a lower cost neighborhood, whatever it might be.
Lower cost country.
Or whatever it might be, but take economic responsibility at the outset for your family. And so I have trouble getting off that hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I get very excited about, I get offered a lot of money to speak. I probably accept more than I should.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably more important for me to be home and being a great partner and being at my kids', recitals and stuff like that. And I still make decisions optimized for money.
Yeah.
I've had trouble getting off that hamster wheel. And by the way, this is a problem of privilege, but I grew up so long with economic stress. And also, I think it got hardwired. I don't want to sound too much virtue signaling. I say my obsession with money has to do with women. I wanted to help my mom. And also, I figured out early, I wanted a broader selection set of mates than I deserved.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that through college, when you were 18, it was the funny, good-looking guys that got women. And by the time you were 22, it was the guys whose parents had homes in Aspen and Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
So I connected very early that if I want to be more interesting to men and more attractive to women in a capitalist society, it involves money.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing. I grew up, single mom, secretary, not a lot of money.
Really?
Yeah, she got cancer when I was 25, right when I was starting Vice. I ran Vice out of a cancer ward. And the first time I got money, and I was so obsessed with money, and by the way, I'm going to get into this for a little. Whenever I go around the world and I look at I'm so fucking crazy. I want to talk about being crazy. I'm like, no access to capital, no access to capital. Because if you have no access to capital, you're not going to make any money.
Right.
And you're just not. And so, like, I'm in Greece. I'm like, wow, there's no access to these things. So, yeah, my mom, thank God, beat the cancer. And I one of the ways I would make money back in the day was gambling.
Right.
And so I went to Vegas. I won a bunch of money. And I went to Palm Springs with a jug of cash.
Right.
Because I was drunk at the Chateau Marmont, and I saw a Martin Landau documentary where his wife had pneumonia because after breast cancer, it fries your lungs. And if you get a lumpectomy and if they take out your
lymph nodes,
you have no immune system. So she had no immune system. She had pneumonia all the time in Canada. So I bought her place in Palm Springs because he had said if we went to Palm Springs, there's no pneumonia because it's the fucking
Try. I moved my mom to Summerlin, Nevada for the same reason.
There you go. So got her a place. She called it her Shangri-La. It saved her life. Got her from gambling. The first thing you do, like as an Irish peasant, is you buy your mama, a house. And so, but that was and I still, it affects me to this day of the decisions I make. I would say 90% of my stress is monetary.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about economics, and I talk about access to capital, disenfranchisement. If you're a young person, male or female, and you're disenfranchised and you don't have money, but you want to make money.
Yep.
Charlie Munger has said that first $100,000, you have to make that first $100,000. However you do it, and then it sort of gets easier after that. But I want to get to is it day trading crypto? Is it inventing something? Is it being an entrepreneur? Is it what the hell is it?
Yeah.
Because it's the 1%. See, this is my problem. Is you realize the 1% is hard. It's hard. It's your odds. I'm a gambler. The odds are against you.
Yeah.
It's hard to get there. Much like New York City, it's hard to stay there.
Okay, so what to do? And it's situational. The first thing you do is you assemble a kitchen cabinet of smart people like Shane Smith and say, can I grab you for 5 minutes? I have an idea. And you say, this is a bad idea. This is a good idea. Tweak it. Get a kitchen cabinet of people smarter than you to help you save you from yourself.
Yeah.
It's very situational, though. If you're graduating from NYU or a good school in Canada, go to work for, in my opinion, the greatest wealth creator in history, and that is the U.S. or Canadian corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Kids come into my office hours and say, I'm getting a degree from MBA NYU. I have an offer from Google, but I want to start my own business. I'm like, don't be a fucking idiot. Go to work for Google.
Sure.
You're going to make
learn.
Do you realize the first year is going to Google out of business school with total compensation, I'm making like $300,000?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, meet some smart people, give yourself 2 or 3 years, and then if you want to start a company, start a company. If you have the credentials and are blessed enough to go to an elite school, slipstream into what is sequestered from 90% of the public, and that is the U.S. corporation, which are still the best ways in the world to get rich slowly.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an entrepreneur and you have that entrepreneurial bug, I think, and you're an economic animal, I would say, loosely speaking, and you have some credentialing, the intersection between AI and healthcare, the most disruptible business in history is the $4 trillion U.S. healthcare industry.
Right.
Find a little niche in a boring part of healthcare and try and use AI to create some sort of service. If you are entrepreneurial but not tech-focused, see if you can find something. The guy that hung these curtains, is making a good living, and 70 to 80% of baby boomers who own small businesses have no succession plan. Because they made a good living, their kids are going to college, and their kid doesn't want to hang curtains. So there's a big opportunity to find small businesses run by baby boomers, buy them carpet cleaning, if you're good with your hands, or vocational, whatever it might be. And also, there's oftentimes, you think, well, I don't have any capital. Sometimes there's seller financing. Sometimes, if you're good and you say, I'm going to come to work for you for a year, and I'm going to help you with laying, cabinetry installation, whatever it is, those are the most AI immune jobs out there right now. And say to the guy, look, you give me the business over 5 years, and then the next 10 years after that, I'm going to give you 3, 5, 10% of top line. That was your retirement strategy. I think there's going to be there's going to be a tsunami of small businesses up for sale that will be seller financing.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
everybody take note of that one.
Well, there's just a lot of that's going to come.
It's huge. One of my biggest regrets is, to go back to, you can't afford a car. I mean, who has enough money to buy a car? That was crippling for me, because one of my biggest regrets is when Vice was opening, we had 80 offices around the world at one time, and we would go to like Mitte in Berlin, and it was and nobody was there, and it was $100,000, and they would come to you and they would say, you want to buy this building for $100,000? You said, no, now it's $20 million, right? Yeah. We did it in Williamsburg, we did it in Shoreditch in the UK. If I knew what I knew now, I would go to the bank and say, I'm going to be my tenant. I'm going to guarantee the payment. You give me a mortgage for like 98% of the thing,
Take it off. I'll take it off your hands.
And it will be, I would now have, in the hottest neighborhoods, because we gentrified them, I would have $1 billion real estate portfolio. But I didn't understand leverage. I didn't understand borrowing. I didn't understand you can go talk to a bank, and they'd love to talk to you. They want to give you money, especially if it's backed by an asset. And that was probably the stupidest thing I ever did, was not doing that, because I didn't understand you could go to a bank and say, give me money.
I mean, we all look back on it. We all have those things. The more general advice I would have for young people in terms of professional success is be as social as possible.
Get out there.
Google puts out a job opening. They get 200 CVs within like 8 minutes. They limit it down to the 20 most qualified. 70% of the time, the person they pick is someone who has an internal advocate. You want to be placed in rooms of opportunities when you're not physically there. And the way you do that as a young person is you go out, you make friends, you drink, and at every possible opportunity, you help that person out.
Yeah.
Right? You set them up. You get talking about job opportunities. You speak really well of them behind their back. You become the most successful people in high school aren't the best looking, the best athletes. They're the ones that like other people the most.
Sure.
The kid who says, hey, great game, Brett, right? Or, wow, way to go on the basketball team, Lisa. The person who shows the most goodwill and like towards other people is the most popular, successful person in high school.
That's a huge one. And I think, to go back to the boutique Chanel of schools, one of the things you get there is just, I think an undergrad education, it's varying degrees of the same thing. You read the same books and whatever. You can have better professors. You can have students that read more, whatever. But what you're doing is you're in a milieu of people who are going to leave Harvard and go run J.P. Morgan and say, hey, I like you.
Yeah.
I don't know this guy, but I know I like you. And I would say the majority of businesses, I have a budget. Speaking of drinking, alcohol has made me, alcohol must sustain me, which you did Churchill, I did Napoleon, my first thing I ever learned was when I went to go sell my first ad. I took the bus to a record label, and the guy says, I have a budget, and I don't know if advertising works. You don't know if advertising works, but I like you, and I like to have beer with you. I don't like him, so I'll give you the budget.
One of the biggest killers of professional advancement among young people is remote work.
Yeah.
You're 38% more likely to be promoted if you're in the office. For every promotion, there are 3 people or more who are qualified. The decider bases it on relationships, and relationships are a form of proximity, or a function of proximity. Also, in layoffs, it's really easy to lay off people you've never met who are working from home in Philadelphia. But when you see how hard someone's working in the office, and they make an effort to put on a tie, and they say hi, and they say have a good weekend, and you see them, they show up with their mom one day, those people are harder to fire.
This is all gold. Everybody should be listening to this, because this is our educator. This is our guru. This is our man. I'm pretty sure, you are one of the most, I'm mad, because we should have met a long time ago. We should have had drinks a long time ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of the devil's dandruff, and we would have solved all the goddamn problems in the world
that's
today.
it.
It's been a real pleasure. Let's keep
Thank
the
you,
lines of communication open.
I like that.
And enjoy the hell out of this. And, look, you're an inspiring guy, and it's one of the regrets I have is that, we had a tremendous pool of talent, and we had this glorious time. I remember during the HBO era saying, like, everybody enjoy the out of this, because this is the golden era of documentary film. It used to be like you pitch it for 4 years and you make it for 3 years, and it goes for 4 days, and then you're done.
You're done.
So enjoy the hell out of it. And I did enjoy the hell out of it, but I enjoy the hell out of this. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you, Shane. It's really nice to meet you, and congratulations on all your success. It feels like we're brothers from another mother.
Exactly, and we're doing this kind of thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm saying we should hang out.
I like that.
All right. Hi, it's Shane Smith. I wanted to let you know about my new Substack. I'm shanesmith.substack.com. Now, I'm going to be posting a lot of new content there, from extended versions of this show to behind-the-scenes stories from my adventures all over the world with Vice. Now, the best part, it's free if you sign up now. So go to shanesmith.substack.com and enter your email. That's it, shanesmith.substack.com. Or click the link below, which rhymes with Bazango.